Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, U.S. President Donald Trump heralds a new American moment in his State of the Union address, singling out Russia and China as rivals. What does it mean for relations between Beijing and Washington? And I talked to Baidu President Zhang Yaqin at the Davos World Economic Forum about breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and how close Baidu and others in China is to perfecting self-driving cars. Let's begin our show on Trump's first State of the Union speech. U.S. President Donald Trump tried to strike a positive tone, declaring a new American moment. Besides taking credit for the strong American economy, he also lashed out against what he called unfair trade practices and labeled China and Russia as rivals. Before our discussion with our panelists coming from both China and the United States, let's take a look at this first.
As is the tradition, the U.S. President was welcomed with thunderous applause and declared that the State of the Union was strong. He said the success of the U.S. economy was due to his policies and tax cuts, but questioned why the nation that built the Empire State Building in a year now takes 10 years to build a road.
Tonight I'm calling on Congress to produce a bill that generates at least $1.5 trillion for the new infrastructure investment that our country so desperately needs.
Getting that money will be tough, but he called on the politicians to come together on issues from infrastructure to immigration, a call for unity from a president who has been accused of dividing the nation. And for other countries, he had warnings. China and Russia are now labeled competitors.
Around the world, we face rogue regimes, terrorist groups, and rivals like China and Russia that challenge our interests, our economy, and our values. In confronting these horrible dangers, we know that weakness is the surest path to conflict, and unmatched power is the surest means to our true and great defense.
Trump also warned the DPRK, signaling out human rights victims and calling Pyongyang depraved. He said he would not repeat the complacency and concessions of the past.
For more on Trump's State of the Union address, we have three panelists joining us in the future. For now, we have two of them, Yuan Peng, Vice President of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, joining us from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Mr. Yuan, to our program. Meanwhile, we're also joined by Saurabh Gupta, a Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist from the Institute for China-American Studies. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. I want to start with you, Mr. Yuan. President Trump already labeled China as rival in the State of the Union address, which is likely to be the most important speech of the year for a U.S. president. What is your take?
Yeah, I've noticed that he mentioned about that. But though like many American or Chinese media once predicted, that he will say too much on China, not only on security arena, but also on trade issues. This time, he just named China once, called China as rivals. In my mind, rivals, in his mind, maybe is equal to the competitors, the revisionists, which are labeled in the newly issued National Security Strategy report. But this time, he called China rivals just once. I think he intentionally, on one hand, he wants to repeat what the National Security Strategy mentioned. At the same time, on the other hand, I think he intentionally wants to decrease the part of China factor in this his overall stress or speech, because the National Security Strategy report named China more than 30 times.
Right.
So this time, he just mentioned China once, want to have the balanced. So China is a very important potential threat or challenge to the American, but he don't want to talk too much in this address.
Interesting.
To balance, leave some space for the future cooperation.
Mr. Gupta, what do you think? Is that the silver lining that Mr. Yuan is reading out of the speech regarding China-U.S. relations?
I think he is totally correct on that. It is a silver lining.
Mr. Gupta, go ahead.
Yes. You know, we have to remember that in the national security strategy, his staff kept referring to China as being a revisionist power. Russia and China, revisionist and revisionist. When Mr. Trump released the national security strategy and spoke on at the moment of release, he did not call China a revisionist power. He called it a rival power with whom we wish to build a great partnership with, which is very different from what his staff had written, frankly, in the national security strategy. So when we hear the word rival come out from Donald Trump's mouth vis-a-vis China, I think we frankly need to be gratified and happy about it. And the fact that China has just been mentioned in passing once is actually indeed a good sign.
So the number does matter. Mr. Trump was quick to point out in his speech that America's era of economic surrender, quote, is over. Let's listen to what he said.
America has also finally turned the page on decades of unfair trade deals that sacrificed our prosperity and shipped away our companies, our jobs, and our wealth. Our nation has lost its wealth, but we're getting it back so fast. The era of economic surrender is totally over. From now on, we expect trading relationships to be fair and, very importantly, reciprocal. We will work to fix bad trade deals and negotiate new ones, and they'll be good ones, but they'll be fair. And we will protect American workers and American intellectual property through strong enforcement of our trade rules.
Fair, reciprocal, IPR issue, those have been mentioned, repeated and again, both at APEC and later at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And now we're also joined on the screen by Jacob Kirkegaard, who's a senior fellow with the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Mr. Kirkegaard, is that any surprising to you that he's repeating those messages once and again? He's suggesting others are stealing the wealth from the United States.
No, I mean, this is very much what the subjects that you would expect him to bring up. But I think we should again be clear that this was a speech that was very light on trade. It had nothing specific on trade, which I think is one of these issues where a lot of people will breathe a sigh of relief because we did not hear any new enforcement actions announced against China or anyone else, which many of us were fearful that he would use this speech for. So in that sense, no news is good news. But I think we should also be clear that the broader Trump trade agenda, this idea that he's going to renegotiate existing trade deals and even new ones, is a complete failure. The reality is that everybody else around the world are negotiating free trade agreements with each other to bypass the United States and bypass the Trump administration. So ultimately, this is something that's going to lead to increasing American isolation in the world.
Whether there is a sigh of relief, let's listen to what the Chinese side had to say. China's foreign ministry has responded with an appeal for cooperation. Let's see it.
China and the U.S. share extensive and important common interests. At the same time, there are still certain differences between the two countries, but the common interests far outweigh the differences. It has been proved by both history and reality that cooperation is the only correct choice for China and the U.S. to lead to a better future. We hope the U.S. side abandons the Cold War mentality and zero-sum game to correctly view China-U.S. relations. We hope that we work together, respect each other, manage differences, and maintain a more sustained and steady development of China-U.S. relations.
And that is Hua Chunying, of course, the spokeswoman from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Mr. Yuan, those voices might sound very familiar to you, but what do you make of the response from the Chinese side? It's quite a constructive, conciliatory as well.
Yes, I think U.S. and China relations now is not in a very good mood and a good shape because of Americans' attitudes toward China become a little bit hawkish, not only from the newly issued two reports, National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, which enable Chinese competitor revisionist, and even thought that American national defense strategy focus primarily is changing from counterterrorism to deal with the re-emergence of the big power competition. Also from the concrete actions, including some the potential trade war and South China and East China Sea sort of things. However, in his the State of the Union address, I think Trump indirectly mentioned China and other countries in the trade area, but not directly named China. This, for me, to show that in his mind he wants to balance his attitudes on China with those two reports, which is very, very negative, which means he still wants to leave some space for the future interaction between the two countries.
Right.
I think, as Hua Chunying just mentioned, cooperation is the only way to navigate the U.S. and China relations in the future. Even if Americans viewed China as rivals or competitors, but these competitors are different from the Cold War type. There's a new type of competitor, which means friendly competition and potential cooperation is a twofold story. This is the only way to pursue in the future, I think.
But Mr. Yuan, putting those wonderful thoughts aside, this is a political year for the United States. This is the midterm election year. This is also a year that President Trump wants to see himself much more established than he used to be than the previous year. So given all of these possibilities, what would they mean for the nuances and ups and downs of U.S.-China relations in a quite a turbulent time? Mr. Yuan, very briefly from you.
Yes, the U.S.-China relations is a long term of history. Now it's in the turning point or tipping point. It's a fact. Nobody can ignore it. But thanks to the two heads of the state last year, and the relations are still in a very stable situation. But this year, I think there are some potential risks. Number one is American domestic politics, the midterm election season. Always the bad news for U.S. and China relations. And secondly, so far we didn't see any agenda for the two heads of the state to visit. This leaves some potential vacancies to the two sides to play in the future. And also the trade issue and North Korean related issue leave some potential challenges. But the good news is that both sides, in particular American side, is aware of the dangers of the potential conflict between the two sides. So both sides are working very hard to find some way out. I think we are doing our best to shape the relations in a more stable situation.
Both sides certainly understand the importance and significance of this bilateral relations. There's no doubt about that. Having said that, though, there is one issue, Mr. Yuan, you just mentioned, the DPRK nuclear issue. In the State of the Union address, President Trump, Mr. Gupta, mentioned that specifically, so-called bloody nose that has been quoted so widely today by all media. There is a danger, not only about the U.S. DPRK relations, particularly concerning U.S. U.S. ally, South Korea, whether the U.S. is going to take any military action and strike without the consent of South Korea, and whether the military action should be an option at all. We have heard also Mr. Gupta just throw in one piece of news that the candidate for U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Mr. Victor Cha, has been suspended in a way because he has a very different opinion, even though he's quite strong on DPRK. But when it comes to military strike, there's a very different opinion coming from him. So, Mr. Gupta, putting all of this together, what can we say about State of the Union address and President Trump's message he's trying to send?
With regard to the DPRK, I thought the message he was trying to send is frankly disappointing to hear. The fact that he would mention that America will not make concessions at this point of time and that it was just about maximum pressure is not going to help the situation. His initial policy when he had become the president was maximum pressure and engagement, and that engagement aspect seems to have has been dropped off, and that is disappointing because, as we have seen from the beginning of this year, inter-Korean relations have been on a very good track. Now, part of the problem with Mr. Trump's approach to North Korea is actually going to be felt by South Korea, because South Korea wants to ease tensions within certain limits with North Korea, and Mr. Trump is going, and in his administration is going in the opposite direction. And so this moment of détente which we have because of the Pyeongchang Olympics itself might be lost as soon as the Olympics and Paralympics are over and the military exercises resume. So I think it's disappointing to hear that message from
Even
Mr.
though
Trump.
Disappointing, Mr. Yuan, is that something that you, as a scholar on the East Asian issues, have already predicted about President Trump's tone toward the DPRK and the overall approach that his administration at least said would take?
Yes, if there is something surprised me in his address, in speech, the State of the Union, I think the only part is North Korean part, because I don't expect he speak too much. Spent quite a few time on DPRK issue, which even in the National Security Strategy report, the DPRK issue is less mentioned in comparison with China, with Russia, and Iran, and other issues. But in this specific stress, which the major agenda, the contents should be domestic-driven and immigration and economic and employment-driven, he spent quite a few time on DPRK. I think this sent a very, for me, it's a very dangerous message, because on the one hand, we see some real rapprochement between South and North, given the Winter Olympic Games. But on the other hand, from the Vancouver conference, hosted by the United States and Canada, with all those 17 former United Nations forces during the Korean War, to the recent the address delivered by President Trump. I think in his mind the North Korean issue now back to the very focus of his recent foreign policy and defense policy. I think the maximum pressure still going on, and the military strike always on the table. So how to avoid the potential conflict on the DPRK is something that all the parties in the world should working hard together. How to prevent that from being going to even more dangerous situation is something we need to do in the near future, I think.
But I guess the near future is already posing some kinds of danger as we speak, even though the Pyeongchang Olympic Games is going to bring the two Koreas together onto the same playground in a way. At the same time, the Army Day in North Korea has already been put forward, rather than in April to February, right before the opening ceremony of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. So there's a lot of things going on at this point. A very shaky kinds of attitude coming from the United States would have a big impact also on the thing that we are having on the DPRK issue. Having said that, though, gentlemen, let's move on to other issues related to the State of the Union address. Mr. Kirkegaard, I would like to have your view particularly about whether President Trump, for the very first time at least, appear presidential this time during the State of the Union address, because he sticks to his scripts. He looked at the teleprompters. He didn't go off it. He didn't send any tweets afterward either. So, Mr. Kirkegaard, is he?
Well, look, I mean, I think we should be clear that yes, by Trump's own standards, he was better behaved, if you like. He stuck to the script. He took the applause lines. And in that sense, he clearly exceeded expectations. But I think we should also be clear that what he did not do in this speech was to be credible in his call for collaboration and bipartisanship. When you read listen to what he said on issues like immigration and others, this isn't going to build any bridges to the Democratic Party, which in my opinion means that once we look beyond the sort of 5 minutes focus on his appearance and look at the substance of his speech, this wasn't a speech that's going to bring forward the political progress here in Washington, where we still don't have a budget. We have a looming debt ceiling vote in early March, and this speech did nothing to promote a solution to either of these two issues.
But on the other hand, Mr. Gupta, people are saying, you know, State of the Union address, come on, it's just a political speech. It is more and more just a political speech rather than declaration of actions in American politics. So will this State of the Union really matter at all?
I think the State of the Union does matter because it does telegraph the important views and important policy aspirations and goals that the President and the administration have. One of the takeaways for me was that in his being a little bit more presidential and being a little bit more mellow, he might be trying to build, as Jacob said, it's going to be very hard to build bridges, but he is trying to see that trying to ensure that he doesn't only have to operate through Republican majorities only. If he can just get a few Democrats here and there, it might make his appeal to bipartisanship a little bit broader. We have to remember at this point of time that all branches of government are in Republican hands, and that is typically a rarity in Washington.
Right.
So one would assume that he would not be bipartisan, but I think on issues like the Dreamers issue on immigration, he does need some bipartisan support, if nothing else, to pursue some of his more radical interests, like having that wall built. So he is showing himself to be a little bit more mellow, more presidential, and I think the State of the Union should be taken with a degree of seriousness, especially because whatever comes out of Trump's mouth just gives a little bit more sign, perhaps, of who he is, considering how mercurial he can be.
Well, when our American guests are focusing on the domestic issues, Mr. Yuan, when we are listening to the speech, rather we take it from a very different perspective. I remember President Trump in his State of the Union address mentioned specifically about not just immigration issues, which is a very dividing issue, but also about infrastructure building in the United States. Enormous amount of investment going to put into that. Also, he's been talking about the revival of the economy. I remember him talking at the World Economic Forum saying, if the United States is great, everybody else will be. Of course, the logic may be different from China's perspective or from others in the world. Mr. Yuan, your take?
Yeah, this address impressed me most is that it's not a typical Trump style, because this address is very comprehensive, very balanced, very low-key, because the purpose of which for Trump is that he wants to make use of this almost the first or second opportunity in front of the two parties, in front of the 50 million American audience and the world, to show he wants to navigate the differences and the division and to call for the unity, because it is very important for him to pursue his future agenda. So that's why he makes lots of time on talking about some very balanced point of view. It's not typical Trump style. But I watched the Democratic response issue delivered by Kennedy Jr. III. He responded in a very emotional way to criticize this, the tone of the address, which showed the differences between the two parties still very, very deep. It's very hard to be navigated. So I'm afraid even if he's very ambitious to say that make America great again, make American people great again, American great again means the world will be even better. But I doubt because of domestic conflict, domestic divergence still very, very deep.
Well, many of us are still digest what is exactly going on in the State of the Union address, and particularly what actions are likely to follow as a result of that. For now, I want to thank the three of you gentlemen to come to our program on a very busy day in Washington, D.C. Yuan Peng, Saurabh Gupta, and Jacob Kirkgard. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you so much. And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program, I sit down with Baidu President Zhang Yaqin, and he gives his 2 cents worth of advances in artificial intelligence and why China is expected to lead in AI research for the near future right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight, coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN, and I'm Tian Wei. Aiming at becoming the most advanced AI innovation center in the world before the year 2030, China is fast becoming a global leader in the field. Baidu, the Chinese search giant, doubled down on artificial intelligence as the core of their strategy, especially on autonomous driving and voice recognition. On the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, I sat down with Zhang Yaqin, the president of Baidu, who shared his insights on AI with me. Before we go to the interview, take a look at this first.
Artificial intelligence is changing the world China's speed. That's how Baidu, the nation's largest search engine, describes its AI ambition. Earlier this month, the company launched its autopilot vehicle, Apollo 2.0. The car can drive itself on barrier-less city roads. Currently, Baidu has devoted a lot of resources to autonomous driving and voice recognition, and developed autonomous driving platform Apollo and conversational AI platform DuerOS. Zhang Yaqin, the Baidu president, said the company is now entering a new era of AI, and China can lead in technology and R&D together with the U.S. It commits 15% of its revenue to research and development and has grown rapidly in China. It now has more than 2,000 people in its AI group. Earlier in 2016, China's State Council announced an AI development plan stating that China will become the most advanced AI innovation center in the world before 2030. Can Baidu really take China's unparalleled scale advantage to dominate the global AI market?
I'm joined here at the World Economic Forum by Dr. Yaqin Zhang, president of Baidu. Welcome to our program.
Nice to be here. Nice to see you at Davos.
Again.
Yes,
Again.
Yes.
So a lot of takeaway this year?
Yes, yeah, this is exciting. This is, of course, the largest Davos ever. There's also a record of Chinese attendance. And I love it. It's cold, but you meet with a lot of people.
Yes, indeed. A lot of intensity of discussions as well, particularly about artificial intelligence. That is quite a field that the world is thinking about. Ethical issues, legal issues, that's what people are talking about.
That's right. Yeah, on one side, people are excited about opportunities AI creates. And also people are concerned about all the issues that come with that. For example, possible loss of jobs and also misuse of the capability and the data. But overall, AI is the most significant transformative force of our time. It really elevates our experience, user experiences for our products. Significant change to the traditional industry, but also it creates new categories. It has a significant, profound socio-economic value.
You and I were talking about this.
Yes.
During the summer Davos.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Earlier, just a few months ago.
Right.
And of course, a few months later, the topic had changed also.
Right.
Because it's shaping more to the ethical area, legal area.
Right.
Well, at the same time, the competition
Right.
for artificial intelligence inside China it's getting ever more severe.
Right.
You know better than I do about it,
right.
Dr. Zhang.
Yeah.
So tell me exactly what are we looking at?
Yeah, when a significant opportunity comes, a new industry arrives, that competition is normal. The heightened competition means it is real, and means there are tremendous opportunities. I think it's healthy, it's a good thing. If you look at in China, essentially all the big internet companies are transforming into AI companies.
You're having intense competition.
Yeah, which is good. And also you see startups, the ventures are beginning to do really well in some verticals.
But when you say it's a good competition, the question is, what is your advantage? What are the advantages of the others? How do you distinguish yourself? Or there's going to be, ruthless kinds of competition?
Right. Well, we are very fortunate in the sense we started investing in machine learning, AI, much earlier than everybody else. So we had a lot of great talents. We accumulate a number of technologies, and also, through search and other services, we're able to accumulate a large amount of data. So we have essentially talent, technology, data, and scenarios, applications. So right now, I'm very happy to see that we are ahead of everybody else in China, and also we are in the frontier of AI worldwide. If you look at autonomous driving technology and the platform we've been developing, it's really gained a tremendous momentum, not only within China but also in global.
What kind of time frame are we looking at, Dr. Zhang, when it comes to driverless cars, for example?
Yeah, it actually happens faster than most people think. Because of the open platform, Apollo we released, it actually accelerates the innovation and also commercialization of level 3 and level 4. Obviously, we don't manufacture cars. So we work with car makers, and they will put this in the marketplace.
Right.
For example, one of our major partner, Kinglong, Jinlong,
yes.
That is the second largest bus manufacturer in China. They will actually release level 4 cars, minibuses, end of this year. And we also see quite a few others will release cars of different level of autonomy in the next few years. I think China has an edge, has an advantage in terms of the market acceptance and the regulatory environment, and also the speed. When I talk about China, it's not only about the market, the capital, technology, and talent. It is actually about efficiency and the speed, which in fact is a huge advantage China over other countries.
Now we see countries around the world are all jumping into this big area of artificial intelligence. Talent is the same.
Yes.
So, okay, China could use money, cash to attract talent. China could use data to attract talent. But what is the ultimate thing that you think China could be attractive to international talent?
It's the opportunity. When you are trying to attract and nurture talents, retain talents, the number one thing is, for the time they spend in your company,
yes.
What are the difference I can make? It's not about money. It's not about certain position. It's really about the things, the difference you can make, the opportunities you can create. I think China right now has so many different applications, scenarios. And also people are very open-minded to embracing new things. Right. For example, autonomous driving. Right? According to a survey, 92% of the Chinese consumers say, "Wow, if this happens, I'd love to try it. I'd love to use that service."
Try the new thing.
Yeah. In India, it's about 70%. American, about 52%. European, 45%. So the Chinese consumers are very open-minded, enthusiastic for new things, which creates a big market opportunity. Companies as well. If you talk with traditional companies in China, whether it's manufacturing, steel plants, or just retails, they actually are very, very open to embrace new technologies. So, That is very, it's a key difference between China, the U.S. and Europe. It's you leapfrog all the current infrastructure.
That's very encouraging. But on the other hand, what if national governments come up with more strict policies when it comes to the flow of talents, when it comes to development of technologies? What would business community do?
Well, that's the reason why I keep stress that it's technologies and talents should be borderless. And I just reading Donald Trump is trying to put a certain tax on the goods, in terms of, and also talent, immigration, things like that. I think those are very short-sighted. China actually has been doing a good job in terms of opening up and being a champion of globalization. And we see that again last year, President Xi Jinping was sent out a very, very clear message that China is a strong advocate and champion of a leader in globalization. And this year, Mr. Liu He reaffirmed that message, and really resonates very well with all the participants.
And what about the competition also among the so-called tech giants? There are, on the one hand, people talk about these giants having too much monopoly power. In China, you also have the BAT, B included with Baidu. Overseas, you see, Google, Facebook, these companies also have so big a voice in the decision-making process and also in the market. So what about the monopoly issue? From a business person, how do you articulate that?
Yeah. Well, in fact, I just came out of a session.
Okay.
That's kind of big
Fresh
power.
out of the oven.
That's right. Big power, big impact. I actually want to add a big responsibility. Right? Indeed, for the first time in history, the top 5 most valuable companies are all internet companies, the big 5. And China also, if you look at the 4 of the top 10 tech companies in the world are from China. So indeed, there are a lot of impact. And as a big company, we do have to be responsible for the things we do and do good to society and be part of.
What do you mean by being responsible? What exactly do you refer to?
Right. For example,
I think there's a monopoly issue. It's not just social responsibility. There's a monopoly issue.
Right. If you look at right now, just mentioned the competition is very intense. There isn't, there really no monopoly at this point. Just look at the search. China, how many search engines are there?
But there are only 1 or 2 that is really occupying about 90% of the market.
That's the user's choice, right? Because because you have a better price.
Well, you could always argue that that's the rule of the market. But the thing is, the rule of market sometimes produce monopolies. The monopoly sometimes wouldn't lead to the next round of healthy development.
Right. Monopolies typically produce when there's a protection. In China, actually, overall internet, the competition is more intense than in other countries, whether it's O2O, it's search, or even e-commerce. There are a lot of competition. When there are real competition taking place, the chance of producing a monopoly is small. There are companies who dominate the market because they have a better products, better technology, and better talents, which is healthy. So let me get back to the responsibility part. For example, in AI, when we develop a technology, we want to make sure it is economically beneficial, but it also does good to the society. Face recognition is a wonderful technology. It actually helps you to do a lot of good things in terms of societal benefits. For example, can help you to find the lost children. And will also make the transaction, the financial transaction, a lot more convenient.
What is the point?
My point is companies can use technology to benefit the society. Right? Not to charity or to just make the society a lot more overall more equitable.
I see. Right. A lot of takeaway from this year's forum?
Well, this is one of the best Davos in terms of the whole world economy. is overall very positive. All the major economic zones are showing positive growth. A few years ago, even last year, there were a lot of concerns. Right now, China is doing well. The U.S. is doing well. European, actually are doing pretty well.
Back.
That's right. Japan's doing well. So this is actually one of the better times in the history of the world economy.
So some positive message to take away.
That's right.
All right.
Right?
Yaqin Zhang, what a pleasure to have you here.
Right.
Once again,
Nice to
see
be
you
here.
in World Economic Forum.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
sir. Yaqin Zhang, president of Baidu, one of the tech giants from China. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.